So you want to invade Vietnam. Your staff has the folder open, and honestly, the first page reads well. A narrow ribbon of a country, shaped like the letter S, 1,000 miles long, but only about 30 miles wide at its waist. So thin that a tank column could theoretically cut it in half before lunch. A country that was poor for most of its modern history. A country with no allies, none, by its own written policy. No mountain fortress capital, no ocean moat, no nuclear button. Before you sign anything, one statistic. Within a single 25-year window of the 20th century, this narrow, poor, unallied country was invaded or attacked by 3 of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. France left in 1954. America left in 1973. China went home after 4 weeks in 1979. 3 of the 5 most powerful seats on Earth, one small country, and the same ending every time. No other nation alive holds that receipt. Today, we audit your plan against the most complete file in this courtroom, and at the end, I will read you the itemized bill. Stay for the final line item, because it is not a weapon and it is not a wall. It is a pond in a quiet neighborhood of Hanoi, and what has been parked in that pond since 1972 is the single best summary of your plan's future that I can offer you. Start with the map, because the map explains the strangest fact about this defendant. Vietnam has no depth. 30 miles wide at the waist means there is nowhere to retreat sideways, no vast interior to trade away, none of the endless hinterland that saved other nations in other files. Any normal country built like this dies in a week, so pay attention to what the Vietnamese did about it, because it is the whole case. Unable to build depth outward, they built it in the 2 directions your maps do not show. Downward, into the earth, and forward, into time. Hold both of those. They are the entire war. First, the ground you would actually fight on. A spine of mountains, the Annamites, runs the country's length, wrapped in jungle so thick that 3 layers of canopy stand between the sky and the soil, which means the greatest surveillance and air power on Earth can stare at a battalion and see only trees. In the south, the Mekong Delta, a water world of channels and paddies where roads are a rumor and every mile is a waiting exercise. In the north, the Red River Plain, diked, dense, and defended. And over it all, not one monsoon but 2, on opposite schedules for opposite ends of the country, so that somewhere in Vietnam, it is always the wrong season for you. That is the surface. The surface is the least of it. Because this country has been rehearsing your arrival for 2,000 years, and the file goes back further than any other defendant we have ever audited. Vietnam spent a full 1,000 years under Chinese rule, and the way that ended tells you everything about the management style. In the year 938, a general named Ngo Quyen faced a Chinese fleet sailing up the Bach Dang River. He had his men plant heavy stakes tipped with iron into the riverbed, invisible at high tide. Then his light boats attacked, feigned panic, and fled upriver, and the fleet chased. The tide went out. The river lowered its guests onto the stakes. The fleet was impaled and burned, and 1,000 years of occupation ended in one afternoon of tidal arithmetic. Now, your staff will say every country has one clever victory. Fine. 350 years later, the Mongols arrived, the empire that had flattened nearly everything from Korea to the gates of Europe. They invaded Vietnam 3 separate times. They were thrown out 3 separate times. And in 1288, the Vietnamese commander Tran Hung Dao ended the 3rd invasion at, read the name again, the Bach Dang River, with iron-tipped stakes in the riverbed and a tide table. The same trap, the same river, 3.5 centuries apart. It worked twice because the invaders read maps and the defenders read tides. In between and after came the rest of the pattern. When the Ming dynasty occupied the country, a leader named Le Loi rose from the hills and expelled them in 1427, and the legend says that afterward, He returned his magic sword to a turtle in a lake, which matters to your planners for one reason. That lake, the Lake of the Returned Sword, is the centerpiece of downtown Hanoi today. The capital's most famous landmark is a monument to ejecting an invader. And in 1789, when a Qing army occupied Hanoi, the Emperor Quang marched north in secret and annihilated it with a surprise offensive launched during Tet, the Lunar New Year holiday, a date every staff officer in this room should write down, because in this country, even the holidays have precedent. Notice the playbook across all of it. The Vietnamese let invaders take the capital. They give you the prize, empty, and then the country closes around the occupation like a slow fist. Their first national heroes, still worshipped today, are two sisters who led a rebellion against China riding war elephants in the year 40. This is a nation whose founding memory, whose oldest saints, whose downtown lake, are all the same story. Someone big came and someone big left. Receipt number 1 from the modern file. France, which had ruled Indochina as a colony, and by 1954 was fighting to keep it. The French command chose a valley in the northwest called Dien Bien Phu, built a fortress of strongpoints on the valley floor, and dared the Vietnamese to attack it. The logic was pure military textbook. The surrounding mountains were roadless jungle, and everyone knew you cannot move heavy artillery through roadless jungle mountains. General Vo Nguyen Giap's answer was that you cannot drive it through. You can carry it. His army took its howitzers apart and hauled them up the mountains piece, by hand, by rope, by shoulder. Behind the guns came the supply line the French had calculated could not exist, on the order of 250,000 porters, many of them pushing ordinary bicycles reinforced with bamboo, each bicycle loaded with several hundred pounds of rice and shells. Walking through jungle that photo reconnaissance swore was empty. When the guns opened fire from the ridgelines, dug into the mountainsides where French counter-battery fire could not find them, the French artillery commander, Colonel Piroth, who had promised his guns would silence the enemy in minutes, reportedly went from officer to officer, apologizing that he was completely dishonored, and then killed himself with a grenade. The siege lasted 56 days. When it ended, around 11,000 defenders of the shattered fortress marched into captivity, and only a fraction of them ever came home. Within weeks, at the conference table in Geneva, French Indochina was finished. An empire that had held the country for the better part of a century was beaten by artillery that arrived by bicycle. Write the audit principle in the margin. In Vietnam, the thing everyone knows is impossible is the delivery route. Receipt number 2, and it is the largest air campaign in the history of the human race. America's war in Vietnam ran for roughly a decade of major combat, and the tonnage tells you the theory. More bombs fell on Southeast Asia than every side dropped in the whole of the Second World War combined. Over the supply route called the Ho Chi Minh Trail, through the mountains, and through Laos, the bombing averaged out to roughly 1 plane load of bombs every 8 minutes, around the clock, for 9 years. And the trail never closed. Repair crews filled craters overnight. Convoys of trucks and bicycles, the bicycles again, moved under triple canopy the cameras could not pierce. And under the ground, the second depth, the one I told you to hold, revealed itself. Northwest of Saigon, in the district of Cu Chi, the Vietnamese had dug not a bunker, but a city, well over 100 miles of tunnels on as many as 3 stacked levels, containing barracks, workshops, hospitals with operating tables, and kitchens engineered. So their cooking smoke traveled through long underground vents to seep out of the earth far away, thin as morning mist. Entire units lived, healed, and staged attacks from directly beneath the war. And here is the detail your planners will refuse to believe until they check it. The United States Army built one of its major base camps at Cu Chi on top of the tunnel network. The enemy was not near the base. The enemy was under the floor. Above ground, the claim goes, and I phrase it exactly that way, because veterans and historians still argue it fiercely. America won every major battle it fought in Vietnam, and if you serve there or study it, the comments below are where that verdict gets litigated. What is not argued is the arithmetic underneath. Ho Chi Minh is said to have warned the French years earlier in words that transferred perfectly. "You can kill 10 of my men for every one I kill of yours, and even at those odds, you will lose and I will win." The exchange rate was published in advance. The strategy was time, the depth no bomb reaches. In early 1968, the Tet Offensive, on the holiday with the 1789 precedent, was by most military accounting a battlefield defeat for the attackers, and it broke the clock in Washington anyway, because the war's promise had been that the end was near, and Tet put the war on every American television screen, saying otherwise. The bill of this receipt should be read quietly. 58,000 American names on a black granite wall in Washington. Vietnamese dead, soldiers and civilians, north and south, counted in the millions. In 1973, the last American combat troops left, and in 1975, the tanks rolled into Saigon. If your family carries a story from this war, from any side of it, the comment section of this case file is open, and it is read. And then the postscript, the receipt. Almost nobody outside the region remembers, which is exactly why your staff must. February 1979. China, Vietnam's neighbor with roughly 15 times its population, sent hundreds of thousands of troops across the border to, in the phrase attributed to Beijing, teach Vietnam a lesson. Note the timing your planners would envy. Vietnam's main battle-hardened army was not even home. It was deployed abroad in Cambodia. The border was held largely by regional forces and local militia. In the mountains of that border, the militia and the terrain charged full price. Within about 4 weeks, having taken the border towns at a cost that remains disputed and heavy on both sides, China declared its lesson taught and went home. Both countries claimed victory that spring, and they still do, so this court will simply enter the one number nobody disputes, the duration, 4 weeks, and let you be the judge in the comments. The audit point stands either way. In the same generation that outlasted France and America, with its army out of the country, Vietnam's leftovers held the door. Which brings us to the Vietnam you would face today, and one honest concession before the bill. Everything else in this file, Vietnam did without an ally, and it still has none, on purpose. Its published defense policy is called the 4 No's. No military alliances, no foreign bases on its soil, no siding with one power against another, no first use of force. There is no alliance tripwire here, no distant fleet obligated by treaty. Your lawyers will love that paragraph. Your historians will then hand them the rest of the file, because the record above is what this country accomplished alone and poor, and it is no longer poor. 100 million people, around 500,000 active troops, with reserves and militia, counted in the millions, in a society where the anniversary calendar is a syllabus of expelled invaders. 6 Russian-built Kilo-class submarines, among the quietest diesel boats made, patrol its coast. Su-30 fighters overhead. Coastal batteries of anti-ship missiles waiting for the amphibious chapter of your plan. The porcupine-bought quills, the tides of the Bach Dang, presumably, still work. So let us read the bill. Line 1, the approach. 1,000 miles of defended coast and delta on one side, jungle mountains on the other, 2 monsoons sharing the calendar, and a defender whose signature move, twice, was letting the water itself spring the trap. Line 2, the depth tax, and it is unique in this courtroom. The depth is not on the map. It is under it, over 100 miles of it in one district alone, proven bomb-proof by the largest air campaign ever flown. And it is ahead of you in time, held by a nation that has waited out occupations of 1,000 years. Line 3, the capital trap. Hanoi has been taken by invaders again and again across the centuries, and taking it has never once ended the war, because in this country, the capital is not the crown, it is the bait. Line 4, the garrison. At the standard planning ratio of 20 to 25 soldiers per 1,000 inhabitants, occupying 100 million Vietnamese requires 2 to 2.5 million troops, stationed forever in the jungle, the delta, and above the tunnels, among a population whose national identity is, functionally, a 2,000-year instruction manual for removing you. Line 5, the exchange rate, published in advance and honored in full, 10 of theirs for 1 of yours, for as long as it takes, invoiced to 3 permanent members of the Security Council inside 25 years and paid by all 3. And now the final line item, the one I promised, and it is my favorite in this entire cabinet. Vietnam keeps the receipts and puts them on display. The iron-tipped stakes of the Bach Dang River sit in museums. The lake named for the returned sword anchors the capital's postcard. The tunnels of Ho Chi sell admission tickets, and tourists from the very countries in this file pay to crawl through them. And in a small pond in a residential neighborhood of Hanoi, surrounded by ordinary houses, the wreckage of an American B-52 bomber has been sitting in the water since December of 1972, right where it came down, left there deliberately, with locals walking past it on their morning errands. Other nations build monuments to their victories. Vietnam's landscape simply is one. Your invasion is not a war plan here. It is an application to join the permanent collection, and the pond, I am told, has room. The verdict of this court: invasion of Vietnam denied. Not because the country is wide, it is famously narrow, and not because it has allies, it has none and wants none. Denied because depth is not always horizontal. This defendant digs it and grows it, and because the file has no gaps to argue with. 1,000 years ejected on a tide, the Mongols ejected 3 times. An empire beaten by bicycles at Dien Bien Phu, the greatest air power in history, outlasted from underneath its own base camp, and a final visitor sent home in 4 weeks by the militia while the army was away. 3 of the 5 most powerful nations on Earth ran your experiment within 1 lifetime, and the results are on public display, in a museum, by a lake, and in a pond. Case number 9, closed. And before you go, this court takes nominations. The jury picks a future defendant, so name the country you want on trial next. 1 name in the comments. And if you want to be here when the verdict drops, join the jury and subscribe, because the Iron Verdict Court is now in session. And your staff is already holding the next folder at arm's length, because it looks like a misprint. The next defendant is one of the most isolated rich nations on the planet, so far from everyone that its nearest serious neighbor is a 3-hour flight away. Its Air Force retired its entire combat jet fleet, on purpose, a quarter century ago, and never replaced it. No fighters, no enemies in range, just distance, sheep, and the calmest defense policy ever written. And when this court ran the audit anyway, the invasion still came back, stamped denied, for a reason no other country on Earth can claim. That case file opens next.